Ready to get started, so if everybody would have a seat. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for attending the Congressional Black Caucus Judiciary Justice for All Braintrust. And I want to thank the ACLU for sponsoring this event. My co-lead on this Braintrust is Representative Wesley Bell, who I will introduce to you in just a sec. But before I do, I want to put forward the purposes of this panel, which is to raise awareness about the imminent threat to American democracy that looms from a reckless, corrupt, arrogant, and unaccountable 6-3 MAGA supermajority that controls the United States Supreme Court. I want to thank our esteemed panelists time to be with us today for this important session. And I want to thank Roland Martin for agreeing to moderate this discussion. Now, I want to introduce you to Representative Bell, my co-lead on this Braintrust, for his opening remarks. Representative Bell hails from St. Louis, Missouri, and is a former criminal defense attorney and also the first black person elected as St. Louis County's prosecuting attorney, a position he used to try to make the criminal justice system more effective, accountable, and fair, including by expanding diversion programs for nonviolent offenders struggling with mental health and substance abuse. Thank you for joining me in this, in hosting this panel, and now I introduce to you Representative Wesley Bell.
Good morning, good afternoon, somewhere in that range, right? I want to share a brief story because the theme, when I think of the fight that we're in, it's about power and having our share of that power, right? And one thing that was, if you study the civil rights movement, there were roles to how we moved, and how we went about securing those said rights. And I had an opportunity to visit Selma for the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday this year and walk across the Pettus Bridge. And we talked to some of the frontliners, and it was just surreal to hear them talk about their experiences, but also understanding their roles. And so we were talking to one gentleman, and he was telling us how, you know, you have folks that were doing the marching, but you have folks who were also on the phones to call the radio station to let people know what was going on. You had people that were organizing bail, and then you had people that was actually going to pay that bail. Matter of fact, they were telling us a story about how they were in a room, probably a third of this size, in a jail, and after the march, after one of the marches, and they're in there, and then one of the young brothers comes up to him, and he's like, hey, when are we getting out of here? And he explained to him, everybody has a role. Reverend Newman is in charge of bond, will be out by the morning. About an hour later, same young brother comes up to him and says, you know, when you say we getting out of here again? Now, you know, he was young, it was his first time, so he was like trying to be patient. Reverend Newman, be out by the morning, don't even worry about it. Third time, same young man comes back. He's like, look, I gotta ask you one more time. Who's getting us out of here? Reverend Newman. Right, Reverend Newman. Glasses, goatee, right? Yep. Ain't that Reverend Newman right there? Apparently, Reverend Newman didn't know his role, and so they stayed there a little bit longer. But I want to start off by saying, I want to first thank Congressman Johnson, who has been one of my mentors since I've gotten here in my freshman year in Congress. And I want to thank him for his leadership and for convening this critical discussion. And I want to take just a minute to talk about redistricting, because it is about power. And redistricting isn't just about lines on a map. As we talked about before, the theme of the day, it's about power, who has it, who doesn't, and whether communities like ours get the chance to be heard. And right now, across this country, we're watching a coordinated campaign to take that power away, especially from black voters. In Missouri, we're seeing it up close. The legislature rushed through a mid-decade redraw pushed by Donald Trump himself, not because Missourians asked for it, but because he knows he can't win fairly. He knows that if people are heard, Democrats will win, and he knows that if Democrats win, he'll be held accountable for his corruption. So instead of facing the voters, he's trying to rig the system. And whose power is on the chopping block? Black communities. In Kansas City, they went after Congressman Emanuel Cleaver's district, a man who has served this community with dignity and honor for decades. We cannot ignore what this means for our democracy. If partisan map makers can redraw districts whenever it suits them, then we are sliding backwards as a nation, backwards to a time when black voices were systemically locked out, backwards to a time when democracy was a name only. But here's the truth. We've been here before, and every time our voices have been threatened, we've organized, we knew our roles, we fought back, and we forced this country to live up to its own promises. And that's what this moment demands. In Missouri, in Ohio, in Florida, in Texas, everywhere, we need reforms to protect the Voting Rights Act. We need independent, transparent processes that put people before politics, and we need to stay organized because Trump and his allies are relentless, so we must be too. So this isn't about just one map or one election. It's about it's about the future of this country and who it belongs to. And I believe just as generations before us proved that the people will rise and democracy will prevail. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Bell. And, you know, they say all politics is local, and my local politicians are in the room. Lorraine Cochran Johnson, the CEO of DeKalb County, is in the room. Are you? I see you back there. Okay. And my wife, Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson, who serves with CEO Lorraine Cochran Johnson, is here. Any other elected officials? Stand up and tell us who you are. All right, good for you to be here. Yes, ma'am. All right, thank you for being here. Ma'am? Wonderful, thank you. Hey, Regina. All right. Yes, ma'am. All right. Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you all. When the Supreme Court created the concept of presidential immunity from criminal misconduct, a concept that has no grounding whatsoever in the Constitution, it shattered the foundational American principle that no man is above the law. That decision also undermined the delicate system of checks and balances which has undergirded and enabled this democracy experiment to thrive and prosper for the last 249 years. Since that seismic ruling by the Supreme Court, it has continued its assault on democracy, as if the unitary executive theory was well-settled law. The Roberts Court, using its shadow docket to reverse precedent without explanation, has allowed President Trump to summarily fire hundreds of thousands of federal workers without cause and despite job protections established by Congress. It has allowed Trump to close down federal agencies established and funded by Congress. It has allowed Trump to impound funds allocated by Congress. And the court has allowed Trump to fire federal agency officials despite legislative protections against such firings. These decisions and others have redefined and empowered the executive branch with powers well beyond its Article II duty to take care that the laws passed by Congress be faithfully executed. And while it has conferred more power to the executive, the court has increased its own power by establishing itself as the only branch that can check executive overreach. This shifting of power is at the expense of Article I, the legislative branch, the Congress, which the framers enshrined as the most powerful branch. In undermining the system of checks and balances, the Roberts Court has enabled President Trump to rule like a king, and in doing so, the court has revealed that it has become too powerful, arrogant, and politically driven. Supreme Court justices served with lifetime tenure, and the only way to remove them from office is through the process of impeachment, conviction, and removal for committing high crimes and misdemeanors. That process does not work to protect we the people from the excesses of today's Supreme Court. So how do we bring about reforms so that we can restore democracy from Supreme Court and executive overreach? Because if reforms are not forthcoming, there will be no stopping the Supreme Court from continuing with all deliberate speed to hurdle democracy back to the time when the only people who had freedom and held power in this country were white male Christian property owners. And the Roberts Court has been building momentum towards that objective by gutting the Voting Rights Act along with other civil rights protections. Meanwhile, MAGA Republicans are using mid-decade redistricting to neutralize minority voting power under the fig leaf of political gerrymandering. The Supreme Court seems on course to rule that the right of a state to gerrymander for political purposes trumps, pun intended, the rights of minority voters to have the opportunity to elect one of their own to Congress. There are legislative solutions to rein in Supreme Court overreach, and I look forward to this panel's discussion of these and other topics. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Roland S. Martin, who is the host and managing editor of #Roland Martin Unfiltered, the first daily online show focused on news, politics, entertainment, sports, and culture from an explicitly Black perspective. Roland also launched the Black Star Network, and he produces a twice-daily commentary on iHeartRadio's Black Information Network. He's an author, a sought-after speaker, and has earned more than 40 awards for journalistic excellence. I'm thrilled to have him here today moderating today's panel, and I want to thank him, and I want to thank the panelists for being with us today. And with that, Roland Martin.
I appreciate it. All right. I'm like, man, let's get this thing going. Let's get it going. And plus, it's always, see, you got to be, now what little youth group you in? What's that, Congressman? What little youth group you in? What's that, one of them purple, that's y'all colors? But y'all know he a smart Omega man to have an alpha come moderate his panel. All right, let's get right into it. Let's introduce our panel. First up, joining us right now, he is the nation's justice correspondent. Y'all know him. He has the biggest fro on TV. Alfred Nobler Fellow of the Type Media Center. His first book was a New York Times bestseller, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Ellie Mistel. Next up, she's the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and the Leadership Conference Education Fund. She has been a litigator for the ACLU, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Please welcome Maya Wiley. Christopher Bruce has built a reputation as both a trusted leader and a driving force for change in Georgia and across the South. He's a policy and advocacy director for the ACLU of Georgia, as well as the director of strategic partnerships for the Southern Collective of the ACLU. And last but not least, she was the last assistant U.S. Attorney General for Civil Rights, the person who actually believed in civil rights, unlike what we are seeing right now. When you talk about Ben Crump said this, and others agree, the most effective civil rights division in the Department of Justice since Bobby Kennedy was Attorney General. Put your hands together for a bad sister, Christian Clark. All right, let's get right to it. I'm going to throw the question out. Anybody can jump into it first, and that is, explain to folk why we have to completely change our perspective on how critical the judiciary is. We expend maximum energy on city council, school district, county, state races, congressional races, U.S. Senate, even presidential election, but we rarely are having substantive discussions about the impact of the federal judiciary on every aspect of our life. Take it away.
Yeah, I'll go with that one. The courts are important because the courts have a veto power over the other two branches of government. All right, now I know that's not how you learned it in school. There are checks and balances and co-equal branches, and the Supreme Court says, I don't give a damn about your check or your balance because I'm the courts and you are not. So any law passed by Congress, any order signed by the president, anything at all done through the people that we elect and promote can be taken away by a 5-4 majority. If you don't believe me, pick up the paper, because you'll see day after day after day the Supreme Court, not Donald Trump, not Mike Johnson, the Supreme Court deciding that all ideas and theories and crackpot cases and illegal activity, all that's fine, and nobody elected them. So if we do not put maximal pressure on controlling the unelected branch of government that has a veto power over the other two branches of government, then we are wasting our time. And every single day, Clarence Thomas, Samuel, John Rollins, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh will remind you of that.
I hate sitting next to Ellen.
See, I gave her the option to jump in there. She should jump in first.
I have not had enough caffeine yet this morning. Okay.
Well, Ellie got enough caffeine for the whole family.
Exactly. But I want to build on Ellie's. How many of you worry about some child in your life getting pulled over by a police officer because of how they look? Just said racial profiling is just. How many of you all like the idea of a politician coming between you and your doctor? Because the Supreme Court took away the fundamental right for people in the history of our Supreme Court that we lost a fundamental right. We are sitting at the precipice of a case that will be argued on October 15th, where this supremely unjust court now has the opportunity that it made for itself, because it didn't have to hear this case, to take away the last shred of what is left of the Voting Rights Act, after it has been shredding it and shredding it and shredding it. And not because we don't need to do more than what we had in the Voting Rights Act, I'm not saying we hadn't, but because it is literally this Supreme Court that has said that this regime, because it's not administration, has absolute power to do whatever it wants.
Well, but for the folks here, though, I want to bring that down, as the late Joe Madison say, put it where the ghost can get it. The case that they're talking about has the potential to literally wipe out half of the Congressional Black Caucus.
What he said. So when I said the last shred of the Voting Rights Act, it is because it is the thing standing, let's just say this, because I don't want to lose this point, because we have power, they are stacking the federal courts, and the Supreme Court was intentionally stacked to put its foot on the scale of injustice, to undermine our power and our rights, so that a few can hold on to theirs. And that is an ideological extremism that has said and includes what Representative Hank Johnson knows well, that it's trying to say black people, even as our population is growing, can be busted up, broken up, and not counted, and so that we will not be represented in Congress in the truth of our numbers and our voting power, because we are a growing population, not a shrinking one.
Christian, I want to, ever after the inauguration, the twice impeached criminal convicted felon in chief, I laid out on the show what we're seeing is a massive effort to defund Black America. And I was trying to get people to understand that what they are doing is they're targeting every single area. We're talking political, we're talking academic, we're talking business. Trump wants to get rid of the $37 billion DBE program. The anti-DEI stuff is impacting every black nonprofit across the country. So this is literally a wholesale assault on Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, Fair Housing Act of 68, everything that we've seen over the last 60 years, this is what they are targeting, the complete black infrastructure.
Yeah, and this is an administration that is abdicating its responsibility to enforce our laws, to enforce our federal civil rights laws, and to enforce the Constitution. Every day we see from this administration abuse of executive power and abuse of executive authority. One executive order after the other targeting us as black people, targeting Latinos, targeting women. And the courts are a check on that. They sign these unlawful executive actions and litigation is filed, which slows them down and forces this administration to tell it to the court. Tell it to the court how your executive order complies with the Constitution and complies with the law. So coming back to your point, your first point, the courts are an incredibly important check on a lot of the abuse that we are seeing from this administration. That said, I am deeply concerned about the Supreme Court and some of the high stakes cases that are going before the court this term, including cases like the one out of Louisiana and Alabama that are teeing up this question about the constitutionality of a core provision of the Voting Rights Act. And we should not stand by idly. Now is a time to really use our voices and to call out the voting discrimination that we continue to see today all across our country.
Christopher, look, we cover this stuff on the show constantly, and you take the case out of Arkansas. What they are targeting, what they're saying is that only the Department of Justice can file a lawsuit when it comes to voting rights discrimination. So they specifically are saying, oh, we're going to take out largest committee for civil rights under law, ACLU, Legal Defense Fund, and the appeals court has already affirmed it because they want that to go to the Supreme Court. So again, what they are doing is, and they specifically filed it in Arkansas for those conservative federal judges to rule on it, that could absolutely decimate any third party from filing a voting rights lawsuit.
And we've seen for decades third-party lawsuits being filed to get you your rights. They purposefully did this to make sure that you are taking away your rights, because you do have legal organizations like the ACLU that files on behalf of the people. So saying that the Department of Justice is the only one that can stand, if the Department of Justice is not about justice, then the people no longer have justice. They are doing this on purpose. Now, it has been laid out in Project 2025, but I'm telling you, I did not know that they would be this creative. Let me take that back from creative. I did not know that they could be this evil, because they know people are going to die because of this. They know they are taking away their rights. They know they are setting up a dictatorship, and they are using our democracy against us because people voted for this clown in office, and now he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. So be very careful. We no longer get to rely on something that now says the Department of Justice. People used to hold that to another standard. Our political system is taking over our judiciary, and that was never designed. Even the racist founders came up with a system of saying we need to check powers everywhere. And now you have racist people in office who are trying to undo what our own founders have already put in place. This is only going to get worse before it gets better if we don't do something about it.
Christian, when we talk about, I mean, it has to be extremely painful to walk out of that building knowing full well what you and others accomplished over 4 years, and to see these yahoos and what they're doing. We're talking about pulling out of the 2021 redistricting case in Texas, pulling out of the lawsuit against the chemical plants in Louisiana in Cancer Alley that were targeting black people, calling it DEI. Killing the settlement where black people in Lowndes County had sewage backing up into their yards, calling it DEI. The HOA case out of Texas where they had the evidence of racism, pulling out of that. So what we are seeing, we literally are seeing them completely pull out of racial discrimination cases, voting cases all across this country. And not only that, a police officer in, a deputy in Los Angeles beats a sister who was videotaping. He gets convicted, and then the new U.S. attorney says, that's actually, we're gonna roll back and give them a post-conviction deal. And then Trump also says, I'm gonna basically pardon any cop who's convicted. That's literally what we are facing.
Yeah, I mean, Congress literally passed laws that charge, that mandate that the Justice Department do its job and enforce these laws. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act passed days after the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act to stand up to modern-day redlining, laws to deal with the unconstitutional conditions in our jails and prisons, police misconduct, which results in loss of life, hate crimes, hate crimes, hate crimes. I'm going to underscore hate crimes because I, frankly, am sick and tired of hearing that we no longer need diversity, equity, and inclusion in our country when literally we are targeted because of the color of our skin. Tell Ahmaud Arbery's family that race doesn't matter. Tell the 10 black people in Buffalo, New York, who lost their loved ones because they are black, that race doesn't matter. It is shameful and disgraceful what is happening to our department. It is shameful that we are seeing the complete abandon of enforcement of our federal civil rights laws, but we should not lose hope. One thing that I think is incredibly important in this moment is to think about what is the strategy. And I'm going to give you just 3 quick points here. One, I think we need to still use our voice. This government is funded off of your back, your taxpayer dollars. So continue to bring pressure to bear. When you see death and injustice and discrimination in your country, call them out. Send them a letter and demand that they act. Let's create the record of their failure, right? The record that they are failing to stand up and protect our public safety. Number 2, we can't ignore discrimination, and so I want to acknowledge the state AGs, many of them who are standing up and leading the resistance in the courts right now. They are an important place to bring forth complaints of discrimination. The EEOC, HUD, all shut down, abandoning mission. Bring those complaints to alternative agencies in your communities, your state AGs, your human rights commissions, your local human rights agencies. We need not turn our back on the problems that we're dealing with. And then the final thing is, don't just be on defense. Now is the time for us to start imagining what the future needs to look like, what the future must look like, so that we don't ever fall back into this incredibly vulnerable position that we find ourselves in today.
Ellie, one of the issues that we're looking at is that because you're dealing with a vindictive administration that seeks retribution, there are a lot of people who are afraid to death of even protesting. They're afraid of being arrested. But to the point that Christian makes, if they never hear us, If we're silent, then their whole deal is just keep going. There has to be resistance to this. The way I look at this is sort of what took place after Brown versus Board of Education, where you had these Southern Dixiecrats who were resisting left and right, some for 20, 30, 40 years. That literally has to be our position, because there is no other side if they wipe out many of these laws.
Yeah, so I want to start talking about the fear because, I mean, to be honest, I'm afraid all the time, right? And that was before the events of the last couple of weeks where I've been canceling appearances left and right because I can't, my agent says that they can't secure me, right? I'm terrified all the time. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is looking at that fear and doing what you have to do anyway. And so I don't have a lot of patience right now for people who are just like, well, I'm too afraid. Yeah, so am I. Doesn't matter. We don't have time to be afraid. And especially when it comes to some of the issues that we're talking about here with voting rights, with the reduction of voting rights, with how they're trying to steal the election, even in this upcoming midterm, the only way to counteract, because we've told you the courts are not going to help us, the Department of Justice is not going to help us. The only way to fight through that is to overwhelm them with numbers. My father, my late father, was an old school gerrymanderer, all right? Like, he could gerrymander this room. You give him a bottle of scotch, he could gerrymander this room in about half an hour, all right? Like, he was like, how many of you know where to get good lemon pepper wings? I see y'all in that district. Right? And just would go through, right? He knew how to do it. And all of his models, which I have seen since the time I was 8 years old, all of his models and all of every gerrymanderer's models rely on a certain baseline of voter participation. The model breaks. You break the system of gerrymandering when you overwhelm them with numbers, right? You look at what's happening in Texas, right? In those districts that they say we're going to give Texas 5 Republican congressmen, only if Latinos keep screwing up. That's the only way that works. If Latinos arrest their rightward slide and turn out in overwhelming numbers, guess what? Those 5 districts do not go Republican.
But Ellie, it's not just even Latinos. First of all, Texas has more eligible black voters than any state in the country.
Well, I mean, that's how we beat Ted Cruz, right?
Right, but also what took place when Beto O'Rourke ran against Greg Abbott for governor, 75% of voters 30 and under did not vote. So what you're dealing with there is you're dealing with a state that's unorganized and is not properly mobilized. Now, from the party standpoint, there are 254 counties in Texas. You only have 81 county parties. And so literally 2/3 of the state you're not even in. But that's what we also are dealing with. And one of the things that I keep stressing constantly on the show is that our mind frame has to be 70% black participation in every election. Because we are also sitting at home. We are Louisiana, 1/3 of black people in Louisiana. That's how MAGA Jeff Landry got in. But then black folks woke up, so when they had those constitutional amendments, black folks turned out in massive numbers, and every amendment got defeated.
But all I'm saying
we
is
have to also be there.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. That's how you defeat gerrymandering, right? The Supreme Court has ruled, a case is called Rucho, the Supreme Court has ruled that they can gerrymander whatever they want as long as they're doing it for political reasons. Right? Now, anybody with half a brain knows that gerrymandering for political reasons and gerrymandering for racial reasons is the same thing. It's the exact same thing, and they know that, right? The cases that we're talking about that are coming up this term that are, as Roland said, likely to wipe out 1/3 to 1/2 of the Congressional Black Caucus, those cases are designed so that the Supreme Court can say that it is illegal to racially gerrymander to make sure black people have representation. And so one of the ways, especially for anybody here in this room that works with media or around, in the public eye, I always try to recontextualize the gerrymandering argument to this. For too long, we're just like, oh, we want representation. Yes, I would love some representation. The fight over gerrymandering is the fight to stop white folks from over-representing themselves. Right. White people want more power than they deserve. See, they forget. White people walk around like they own this place. They're only 60% of the population. Just because they live in enclaves where they only see themselves and Consuela doesn't mean they are 95% of the population.
Well, in fact,
they are 60% of the population, and they want more than 60% of the representation. They want 75% of Congress, which is what they have now. They want 90% of the Senate, which is what they have now. They want 100,000% of the Supreme Court, which is what they have now because they don't count Clarence Thomas. They want to over-represent themselves in all places of American life, and the fight over gerrymandering is the fight to make them stop.
Well, and again, in the case of Texas, whites make up 39% of the state.
And they will control, after this
But
redistricting, 73% of the districts.
But here's a piece. Those who vote Texas are 61% white. So it's 61% minority, but 61% of the folks who vote are white. And so again, that's leaving power. But when we talk about, a lot of the focus of my obviously is on Supreme Court, but state court's critically important. When the Supreme Court ruled, said, hey, we have no role in partisan gerrymandering, it's up to the states, then all of a sudden you look at what happened in Wisconsin, why those races were so important. If Sherry Beasley, and this is, again, I could cuss out anybody black who did not vote in North Carolina. When that sister lost, she lost by 401 votes. Had she won, Democrats would have controlled the Supreme Court 6-1. She loses, it was 4-3 Democrat. The next election, they lost, now it's 5-2 Republican. But that Democrat court stopped political gerrymandering, racial gerrymandering, all of those voter ID laws. Republicans were so pissed, they were going to give the power to the court below them, as opposed to the Supreme Court. So we also have to be thinking, to Christian's point, what's next, we can't ignore state Supreme Courts. And too often, we are, and again, Wisconsin's a perfect example of what happened. When that court flipped, things changed. When the Ohio court was even, you saw proper rulings, now Republicans have control of that court as well. So we must be focused on state Supreme Courts.
And this is to my point about reproductive rights. The only way to have reproductive rights now is by...
Because we're in a straight states' rights world now, where the Supreme Court has said states' rights. And yes, I mean that in all the racist ways. But that means, and remember, I was so struck by Kristen's calls to action, which I think are so important, like your attorneys general and your civil and your human rights commissions and places you can go and complain. The thing is, more than half of the black population lives in the South, which are the very places where Republicans wouldn't let Democrats, when they were in control of the Senate, be able to get their nominees through the blue slips, as we call it, right?
And Democrats, like Dick Durbin, went along with it.
Well, and a lot of us kept saying, if they're in the majority, they're going to throw the rule book out. So why? But blue slips is not a law. It's not a requirement. It's a way.
Rule.
It's a rule. It's an
Just like the
informal
filibuster.
rule. It's an informal rule. It's an agreement. It's a handshake. And literally but the idea of it was a good one, which is let's make sure that electeds, that we have a bipartisan way of moving judicial nominations. My only point about this is it was black districts, and that also impacted things like U.S. attorney nominees. I mean, so the people...
U.S. attorneys, U.S. marshals, I mean, it was a lot of stuff.
All these implications for what happens to folks in their states. But to your point, we have for too long, whether we're talking about the donor class, the foundation class, whether, in a lot of instances, national organizations, forgetting how much power we have in the South, which is why so much of the gerrymandering has focused on the South, because that is where our demographic power is. That's why all this, not all, but a lot of the states we're talking about with this gerrymandering that can do so much damage to black voice is happening in the South. And the way that we do that is, as Ellie has said, is building power. But I think here's the point we have to acknowledge. And I own this, right? We talk about the courts and laws really well. And what so many of our people are like is, but what difference is it going to make to me?
Right.
Which is why grounding it, as Ellie did, as I try to do, is what actually does hit you right at home, right in your neighborhood, right in your household? Because all these decisions are, but it's easy to get caught up in the
Abstract.
abstract rather than making sure people understand that the stakes are real and in real time for real people, because so many of our folks are saying, well, what difference does it make? And a lot of it is because of that power structure in states where they feel like I showed up to vote and then nothing happened. I mean, remember, a lot of people who did not vote in 2024 did vote in 2020. And then there were a lot of white folks who did not vote in 2020, but did vote in 2024. What's the difference? The difference is, what will it matter to me? Our communities have to understand it will matter, and we have to talk about it as you always do, Roland, too, in very practical, real-life terms, and in terms that understand how much of a difference it can make in their daily lives.
Christopher, we talk a lot about gerrymandering, but statewide offices are not gerrymandered. And this is where, again, what we have to recognize. Bishop Barber, William Barber, sent me some data after the 24 election. You had more than 600,000 black people in North Carolina who did not vote in November.
Right.
You have more than 1 million black people in Georgia who did not vote in November.
Right.
You have some statewide positions in Georgia on the ballot in November dealing with the Public Utility Commission,
Public
the
Service
folks
Commission.
that set the electric rates. Now, those are not sexy races. They're not the United States Senate or the president, but when you're able to grab statewide power, now you can wield it.
Exactly. And you know what? It's sexy for my wallet, because that's what I want. Have y'all noticed that your electric rates are going up? Right? And we have a public service commissioner who could tell the power companies, you cannot raise rates. I mean, when we're talking about how is this going to impact you directly, this does impact you directly. It is the messaging that you have to get out. Roland, I'm glad you're bringing up numbers, because this is what we really do need to talk about. In 2020, Joe Biden won the vote by what? 81 million votes. Donald Trump won 74 million votes. 74 million people voted for this person. You had a 7 million person gap, and no one declared Biden with a mandate or any other way of ruling. Fast forward to 2024.
First of all, no one said Biden got a mandate. Biden didn't say he had a mandate.
Biden didn't even say it. Right. I'm glad you're pointing that out, because in 2024, Trump wins 77 million. That's only 3 million. It's a matriculation. It's what the party should have done
by
anyway.
One mandate.
Not. And your vice president, Kamala, won 75 million. We're talking about a 2 million vote between the two. And he says, I have a mandate to rule, to really be a dictator. And he's still continuously saying that. Here's the difference within this. Goes along with the numbers. 81 million compared to 75 million. Where were those 6 million people who voted in 2020 who did not vote in 2024? And not only that, the most alarming number is the 90 million people who could have voted that didn't. Because our democracy deals with their participation. If you are not in this democracy, what happens? Literally in the definition, it becomes a dictatorship. Less people are making that decision who are unaccountable for it. So until we actually get people to be able to vote, then we're going to continuously have, again, back to what I was saying before, higher electric rates. The democracy is set up for you to win. The question is, do you want to have that power to make this happen? And if you don't, the people are going to take away your rights altogether.
Well, okay, I agree with that. I agree with everything that we're saying about the importance of voting. But I want to pull on that thread about Biden didn't say he had a mandate when he did. Because what's not going to happen is I'm not going to come all the way to D.C. and just talk about people who aren't here. I'm going to talk about the people who are powerful, right? Right? And part of the problem is that, as you were saying, Maya, sometimes when our people do vote, nothing does change for them. Right. The policies don't happen for them. I mean, I disagree with Trump as a staff, label, and whole crew. But he's out there every day. He seems like he's trying to do the things that he promised to do in these aggressive, chesty, illegal, unconstitutional, ways. Right? But when we get in power, we're just like, okay, guys, we're in charge now. We're gonna change the curtains. Like, what? Like, Like, where is the energy? So, like, we need to do a better job so now I'm not talking about the people who aren't voting, I'm talking about the leaders who get the votes. The leaders who get the votes need to do a better job of paying that off, of paying that back, of showing people how their votes directly translate into things in their lives like we're talking about, because that's where you lose the 6 million, right? Because that's where you lose the people when you come in and you have power and you don't use it maximally. That's what Republicans always do. They use every shred of power maximally.
But that's also why it's not just voting, it's demanding. Because we also have the power to shift the course of what politicians are promising to do. And the way we do that is by not only voting, but making the demands for what we want to have be for our vote. What are we going to get? What do we want? What are we demanding?
Holding them accountable.
Yeah,
but also meaning that the end of the election is the end of one process, the beginning of another.
The accountability.
And the next question out, because I was going to go to this, so I'm going to do this here. If you are 55 and under, stand up. Okay. All right. Got it. All right, y'all can take a seat. So I might as well start with you on this point here. And I think there's something, when we're talking about how do we connect the dots, how to explain to people what's going on, I think we also have to be honest what has happened with our own black grassroots infrastructure. The people who were post-civil rights, so I'm born November 1468, so I call myself a post-civil rights movement baby. So the people between 68 and I dare say 2000, these are the people in communities, and we know who they are. They walked blocks, they kept us apprised of the issues, they were involved in campaigns. Those folks are now 75 and 80. My parents are 78. They worked elections 50 plus years. They've been precinct judges, all that sort of stuff. That group is retiring. Part of the issue that we are facing as a community, we have not replaced this massive infrastructure in cities and states across the country with those folks who are highly engaged, and this generation is thinking, oh, we can do this on social. No, they were face-to-face, door-to-door, and they were going to city council meetings, commissioners' meetings, education meetings. So I think we also have to recognize that our infrastructure has not been replaced. So part of the reason, Christopher, why they are disappearing, because those were the people who hit them for every election. And so we have to replace that infrastructure because they are retiring or they're becoming ancestors, and that's also what's hurting us across the country.
What he said. That's good, Roland. We could just mic drop and leave that right there. Let me add to it, because I so agree. One, if you track foundation and donor numbers and giving over the past several decades, you will see a black community infrastructure always got a very small percentage of that funding. We've had little blips from a few foundations on a couple of things, like take George Floyd, where suddenly there was a huge promise of money. Not all of it, by the way, got spent, but it was supposed to help build infrastructure and action. A lot of it didn't get spent, and then within 2 years, it was gone, right? So some of that is that infrastructure. A lot of that infrastructure was infrastructure because people just put in sweat equity. As we gained, we really did expect to be like paid. And by the way, that was a good expectation. There's nothing, we should get paid. but at the same time, you know, that the money did not flow or follow. But this is what I've been trying to say also to my kids who are 24 and 21, because we also have a generational divide because of technology, about what it even means to engage. Because the other thing I've heard from my kids, this is an honest conversation for the 24 election, because my kids were pissed about Palestine. And they saw that as apartheid South Africa. They saw anybody who was not engaging in that fight as not being about anything they cared about at home either. And my youngest said, we're not gonna vote. Your generation only cares about the lesser of two evils. And we're not gonna we're not going to vote for any evil. This is an honest conversation. And I said, well, first of all, I think we need to have a definition of evil, because I don't think we're sharing a definition. But put that aside. Just put that aside. What do you want? What do you want? And then, of course, lots of things came out, right? About what, and there was a lot of good things. A lot of things right here at home. And I said, well, okay, how are you going to get it? And the response was, well, when someone is in office who is going to do what we want, then we'll engage, then we'll vote.
And you're like, well, how do they get in office?
I was like, whoa, explain to me the strategy for that.
Yeah.
And then I reminded them of one other thing, which I could do because I ran for office. I said, what anyone will tell you if you're a candidate, what your staff will tell you, your campaign staff is, don't go to that community because the voting turnout is low. You don't waste your time. And when I was a candidate, I was like, I'm gonna waste my, to quote unquote, waste my time in all these communities because I want them to get out to vote, whether they vote for me or not. But my point to them was, I was the only candidate doing that. Everybody else was tracking voter-rich district, not just districts, buildings. You go to a neighborhood and go to one building.
Right.
And I said, but your generation, you and millennials, could own the elections.
Yes.
Could own them. You could tell all us boomers and Xers to go to hell and demand what you want, but you have to show up to start demanding it. And that was a different conversation.
Right.
And what we have to do is have that conversation.
So the reason I raised it, Christopher, is because we can talk about the courts, but whoever wins the presidency appoints judges. Whoever wins the Senate confirms or denies judges. And so you can't divorce voting from the conversation. Right. But also why the infrastructure has to be talked about is because if we're trying to have this conversation, because that's Supreme Court's here, and then state Supreme Court's here, but then we start talking about judges here. We saw in 2018, I helped campaign for these 18 sisters who ran in Harris County. They all won.
They all won.
They have been under attack since 2018. They've been methodically picking them off. These are folks who are the local judges. Right. Then we start talking about the attacks on DAs. You could be a Democrat DA who got no Soros funding, they're gonna say you were Soros funded. And so what we have to understand is that we cannot be having high-level conversations without understanding that the only way this changes is that we have to rebuild infrastructure that is local grassroots. So somebody sitting here is like, well, I don't know what I can do. You have to literally go back. I dare say we talked about numbers. Stop trying to sit here and go out to a football game to register people. No, pick the lowest voting black precinct. Okay. And say, we're going to go knock on those doors in this precinct 4 to 5 times, and to Maya's point, ask them, what do you want? And now connecting with the issues. But that has to be our marching orders as opposed to having high-level discussions about the Supreme Court and the federal bench.
Right. So you're talking about directly talking to low-propensity voters, low-propensity black voters, talking to them and getting them involved in the process.
But also looking at the very data and saying, if this precinct has 500 registered voters, and only 150 voted last time, then we should be focusing our energies on the 350. Now, if that is now replicated in 9 other precincts, you now are talking about more than 3,000 votes. The sister who just lost for the mayor in Mobile, Alabama, lost by less than 1,500 votes. 3,500 votes can flip numerous campaigns.
Literally, and it's like that. And I'm gonna pull a roll in real fast, y'all. How many of you in here are lawyers? If you could raise your hand.
Are lawyers?
Lawyers, yes.
Stand up. No, don't raise your hand, stand up.
He's gonna make them stand up. There we go.
I'm so sorry.
There you go. See, he said, I'm sorry. You sit down. The reason why is, and I'm gonna point this out, there are 1.3 million lawyers in the United States of America. 1.3 million. Do you know how many of them are black? 65,000. 1.3 million. 65,000. I'm gonna put that in a better perspective, especially with my Congressman Hank Johnson here. Where our Super Bowl winning Atlanta Falcons play, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I'm not even going to comment on that.
Y'all won what Super Bowl?
Not even going to comment. See, didn't do a debate. There are 72,000 seats in that stadium. You can fit every black lawyer in this nation in that one stadium and have room left over, spacious room left over. That goes along directly with what you're saying about, hey, they want it all. And they've tried to have it that way by blocking barriers in access to education for us to get to these places. So what can you have when you go to those low propensity districts? You could have your next lawyer in place to happen and represent your community all together. And you wouldn't get 90% of the Senate. You wouldn't get almost 100% of the Supreme Court as you're talking about. You actually have to have black people in power, and you actually have to do that through education. That education starts with talking to those communities that people overlook all the time. So going into those communities that you typically wouldn't go to, and you can produce those people who just stood up earlier.
This is the point that I was making earlier. Call out the discrimination, right? The underrepresentation of black people in the legal industry and in so many sectors. How dare anyone suggest we are at a point where we do not need policies that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our country. But I want to make a point that adds just a little bit of urgency to this discussion that we are having about political power at the local level. Do not be surprised when this administration starts to farm out its playbook to local and state officials across our country. Let's not get caught flat-footed. It's very important that we think about who is sitting on our school board. Are they ones pushing for banning books and stripping stories of slavery out of our kids' history books? It matters who serves on your school board. Think about running for a school board if you're somebody who's thinking about serving and being in public office.
Well, Kristen, we saw that in 2022. First of all, 2020, George Floyd gets murdered. 2021, the right specifically attacks Black Lives Matter. 2022, it was all about CRT. I've run 15 black news organizations. I ain't never heard of CRT in my life, and I'm black. That was 2022. They used that to sweep school boards all across the South and immediately start firing black superintendents. Then 2023 was woke. Then 2024 it was DEI. So what happened there was many of us were asleep on those school board races, and they took over our districts and started firing black superintendents, black teachers, book banning, and now in 24, a lot of those Moms for Liberty people lost. But to your point, we still are not understanding how they built their infrastructure through school boards.
That's right. And it doesn't stop there, right? The sheriffs, elected people who run the jails, district attorneys, they're the ones who decide what we're prosecuting, what we're not prosecuting.
You have a DA in Tarrant County who my show launched September 4th, 2018. Crystal Mason was on my first show. She's been on my anniversary show every year since. It has been 9 years since she tried to vote, and that racist DA in Tarrant County is still trying to put her in jail. And her vote never even counted. So to your point, that's a DA race. The sheriff in Tarrant County, 70 people have died in his jail in the past 7 years, and he got reelected. And Tarrant County is the last major county in Texas that's red. So the point you're making is there's a lot of black folks there. And we are still not turning out where that DA and that sheriff is targeting black people.
Yeah, and there are places where we can all serve and where we can make our voices heard, where we can be a check on the unlawful, discriminatory stuff that we see when we're not watching and when we're not vigilant. So I encourage people in here to find ways to use your voice, find ways to serve in your community.
Ellie, if people are picking up on this, is what we're trying to also get folks to do is stop thinking macro but think micro. Yeah. You have to, you can't, if you want to impact nation, you got to go state, city, then becomes, or county, then city, then when city becomes neighborhoods, blocks, streets, houses, person in a house. That's literally how we have to think. And so if you're a person here and you have finite time, finite resources, if you say, hey, all I can do is reach out to 25 people
which is 25 voters. We've seen how 25 votes can change, but that's how we have to be thinking. How do we make micro changes that become macro?
Yeah, so I that's exactly where I was going, actually. So I wrote a column in The Nation.
I was reading your mind.
I wrote a column in The Nation about small acts of defiance, about how anything we do right now to stand up to the fascism and terrorism and authoritarianism that we see serves as throwing a wrench into the machine to gum up their works, right? So, and small acts of defiance in this administration, because it's such a target-rich environment, small acts of defiance can be making sure that trans kid gets invited to your kid's birthday party. Right? Making sure the gay kid who hits the home run gets clapped for just as loudly as the straight kid who hits the home run. Like making sure that those kids feel included in the community, because that's what one of the things they're trying to take away. But another way to do this, to wrap it into what we're talking about in this panel, and I can't believe that I'm going to be the person on this panel defending social media, but here we go.
I want to hear this.
The thing is, with social media, is that it turns all of you into your own private pocket journalists. The highest, best use of social media is not to do political activism, as we've talked about. Like, that actually needs to be face-to-face. But you can popularize individually things that are important to you, and that includes things involving the courts and voting rights and this kind of stuff. Because let me tell you a little secret. Judges, for the most part, hate attention. If they wanted attention, they would have run for Congress. If they wanted attention, they would have run for office. Now, there are a couple of judges, we know them, they like attention. James Ho in Texas, he loves the camera. But for the most part, especially your state and local court judges, they didn't get into this game to get attention. And if they're doing the wrong thing, they got into this game to hurt people. And when you shine attention on these judges, when you shine attention on these DAs, which you can do in your, again, as Roland's saying, thinking locally, which you can do in your community on your own Facebook page, or your own TikTok, or your own Instagram. For the most part, these people don't want that attention. They want to do their work in secret. And just highlighting what they're doing. I always think of the case of the Stanford rapist swimmer guy. That judge did not think he was going to get all that smoke when he let the good white boy off for boys being boys. And his whole life changed once people started focusing on what he was doing. And we can do that in every single community. We can do that in every town. In my town, I live in Mount Vernon, New York, right? And I'm on that Mount Vernon Facebook page with a bunch of old white ladies, talking about the things that I'm talking about, highlighting we have a black fire chief, right? He seems like a good guy. I'm always promoting my fire chief. Never fire him. Tyrone is the best, just wanted to say, right? That is a way that I am using not my public social, but my private, local social media to bring attention to officials who otherwise wouldn't get attention. And when they're doing something wrong, I promise you they don't want that smoke.
But also I want us to think about how we have to use social media differently. What I mean by that is, the mistake that a lot of people make is they'll say, oh, that's easy, Ellie, because you're on all of these shows, you have social media. Roland, you've got you on my show, because I own it. You've got 5 million social media followers, but what folks have to understand is you have to think what Dr. King said on April 3rd, 68 in his last speech, because part of the problem, too many of us have only listened to the bottom 2 minutes of the speech, the mountaintop piece, and we ignore the other 41 minutes. Some of y'all gonna get that when you get home. He literally said in that sermon, we have to move as a collective. So if you have an organization of 20 people, you should say to the 20 people, what's the social media footprint of all 20 people? And now we're not gonna distribute the exact same content to all of our social media platforms. So 20 people now could be speaking to 20,000. So it's how we use these tools that also changes how we communicate. And I want to go to Maya and Christian on this, and I've dealt with this here, and this is not just solely with, because I've been calling my brothers as well, but I had a millennial sister on my show, and she was like, Roland, I'm tired, and I was like, okay, and I tried hard not to cuss. I tried real hard.
It's getting harder.
No, but that show called Unfiltered, so I just started cussing. And the reason I got a problem with that, I have a problem with hearing anybody 30
say, I'm tired. And I just think we also have to be willing to challenge our folks to say, you aren't sitting where you are because somebody else got tired. So we gonna have, so when you say honest conversations, some folk gonna have to get checked with this, I'm tired. And listen, I love to dance, I appreciate boots on the ground, but there are different types of boots on the ground that have to happen in Virginia in November, in New Jersey in November, then all next year. Let's close it out with that, go ahead. Yeah, I ain't got a problem pissing folks off, but going right ahead.
Well, first I want to really acknowledge Congressman Johnson, who has been a stalwart leader and voice in Congress, including on putting some rational roadblocks and checks and balances on our court system. So I just want to say that because Hank Johnson ain't tired.
And one of the
or if he is, he don't care.
And one of the few CBC members who is active on making sure black-owned media gets proper investment in advertising dollars. But go ahead.
Right. That is right.
Thank you, Congressman Johnson, for your leadership. Look, you said it best, Roland, so I don't know why I have to pick it up. But I will say this, and I have said this to my own children when we're talking about, in that same conversation, the I'm not going to, or I'm tired, or it doesn't matter, or fill in any of the blanks. I said, because we know in our family, the first family members were freed from slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland. And the Hugheses, Maddie and William, there is a cornerstone in the one-room black schoolhouse that operated from 1865 that they and 4 other formerly enslaved families founded. Till 1964, that one-room black schoolhouse operated. Wow. 1964, and they know that. And I said to them, well, I said, let me ask you something. When you think about that cornerstone, I said, when were we freed? And they go, oh, Mom. Like, we know when we were free. I said, right, but when? Tell me. And they said, 1865, Mom. And I said, right. I said, when did we win voting rights? 65. Not 64. Civil Rights Act, no, 65. I said, 1965. I said, 100 years. I said, what do you think was happening over the course of those 100 years? I said, do you think somebody was sitting down saying, I'm gonna wait till something happens that's good? You think I'm gonna wait for somebody? You think they waited for someone to come along and tell them, oh, I've got the answer for you and I'm going to deliver it to you? No. I said, do you know their names? I said, can you name people who were in 1922 or 1935 who were fighting for what you're complaining about? And they were like, no, Mom. And I said, you have to pass the baton. You don't get a guarantee about the outcome of your sweat equity. We never have as black people, and we've never stopped, and we're not stopping now, and none of us get to. But every one of us has a role to play. Some of us will be writing and speaking. Some of us will be controlling the narrative and bringing voices to bear. Some of us will be in the courthouse. Some of us will be in the streets. We all have different roles to play, but not one of us can stop. Not one, because we have a baton and we're gonna keep passing.
That's
Kristen.
right. That's right. One day, those behind us will say, where were you? What did you do in this moment? Did you stand on the right side of history? This is not a moment to capitulate. It is not a moment to put our head under a pillow. We need to use this moment, this time we have here together at CBC, take this time to strategize, find clarity, walk away with an action plan.
Yep.
Imagine if everybody in this room went back to their community and lit a spark. a spark that wasn't there previously. I also want to thank Congressman Jackson. I want to thank the CBC. They are our North Star in this moment, but I also want to recognize Congressman John Lewis. We talked about 1965. The Billy Club that he took to the head, staring down racism on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, scars that he bore throughout his life, up until the very end of his life. I think about 2021 in March, in Selma, right before we shut down for the pandemic. John Lewis is losing weight, he is growing frail, and he still finds the energy in his last days to get out on that bridge and tell us that you must never give up. You must fight, go out and vote, never give up. And so I close taking John Lewis's charge to us in his dying days. That's the charge that I present to you. Sitting still in this moment, it is simply not an option.
Christopher. Good. And I'm going to start off with, again, thanking Congressman Hank Johnson. It's amazing. And not only the Congressman Hank Johnson, his wife, Commissioner Marita Johnson. Thank you. And the reason I call her my second boss, because doing this type of work, she focuses on voting rights. You say, hey, Chris, we need to do something to make sure everyone in DeKalb County is out voting. What can we do? And I'm calling her out by her first and last name and her title because I do know her. If you do not know the names of your commissioners, you need to know them. That is the way that you actually make this democracy work. She's a leader in the community. Let's help her lead. The other people, our CEO, Lorraine Cochran Johnson, her staff, her chief of staff, Leah, Martha, all these people who are in these seats that you voted for or didn't vote for, hold them accountable. This is a beautiful room with beautiful people on it. You know how so many people you went into the mirror and you put on your dress, you put on your suit, and you said, I look good? We need to start imagining that for freedom. And we need to do that locally. Let's make sure that we can do what we can do in the micro level of saying that this county, this city, it looks great. Take away all that racism that you have, because guess what? There's no voter suppression at the polling place where you are helping people being able to vote. Be in the community. That is the act. That is the thing that you can't come around every 4 years and tell people, well, you need to go vote. I don't know you. How about you get to know me first, and then we can talk about it. And that's how we win.
Ellie.
Yeah, I'll close with where I started, with fear. These are incredibly scary times. We live in a politically dangerous world, and it has crossed over from theoretically and politically to physical. So I think about, I've talked about this before, but I always like to play this game with myself, where I'm talking to Frederick Douglass, right? I'll be like being the CBS and be like, long line, and I'll, Fred, what? And Fred will be like,
What y'all talking about, hair?
right? Like, right? Where's my VO5, right? And I am.
Y'all gotta have some levity. Come on now. Go ahead, Ellie. Go ahead.
And I imagine Frederick Douglass saying to me in this moment, brother, you afraid of this? You afraid of this?
Come on now.
You got all these lights? You got all this opportunity. You can say what you want to say, and ain't nobody gonna come bursting through to hang you up by your short hairs? You afraid of this? And that makes me not afraid. And that reminds me of what everybody's saying. It reminds me that we do not come from a defeated people. We come from an undefeated. And we have to keep that same energy and that same passion and that same commitment and that same courage even through this moment.
So Ellie and I think way too much alike. There was a particular scene in the movie Selma that I love. I remember watching it. Oprah had a showing for the Legends in Santa Barbara, and it blew me away when I first saw it. Y'all might remember there was a scene where Carmody Jogo, playing Coretta Scott King, was talking to Lorraine Toussaint.
and they were talking. She was having a meeting. She was preparing for her meeting with Malcolm X, and she was, to your point, she was afraid. She was scared. And I saw it, and I said, man, that was a powerful scene. So I hit Ava. I was like, I was giving a speech. I said, I need that dialogue. And I often send this to people because when people hit me up and they talk about, man, you know, how do you stay focused? How do you stay not afraid? How do you stay on these folks' necks every day? And I said 24/7, 7 days a week. That's what we're gonna do. And I'm gonna play this because what was so powerful about it, it spoke to what you said, because we do often forget where we came from. So let's see if we can have this all the way up.
I'll tell you what I know to be true. It helps me in times when I'm feeling unsure. If you'd like.
Please do, Ms. Boynton.
I know that we are descendants of a mighty people who gave civilization to the world. People who survived the hulls of slave ships across vast oceans. People who innovate and create and love despite pressures and tortures unimaginable. They are in our bloodstream, pumping our hearts every second. They've prepared you. You are already prepared.
And it's as simple as that. So the only question for us is, what do we do leaving here? If you leave here, you come back next year complaining about the very same thing, then you actually are part of the problem. But if we leave here and literally commit to making these changes, then they can be defeated. Evil can be defeated. Evil can be stopped. And I'm using evil purposely. Because that's exactly what is going on. We're living in a time where they're trying to deify an individual, saying he was Christ-like, but he did not advocate policies that Christ would support. And so we have to be willing to say that. We need black preachers to return to the prophetic tradition of speaking truth as opposed to being afraid in pulpits. We need black media, as Dr. King said, to return to the militant and the substantive as opposed to the conservative and the complacent. That actually has to happen. And so the only way this changes is the folk in this room take it upon themselves, because we are literally the folk we are asking to come save. Because they're looking to us for leadership. I travel this country and I talk to folks in barbershops and at convenience stores and all over the place, in airports, and they all say, man, what are we going to do? They literally are looking for black leadership to lead. And so if you call yourself a black leader and you're following, then you got the title wrong. They are looking for us to lead, and that's what has to happen. And that's why we use our platform on the Black Star Network. We're going to do it every single day. And the most important reason why we have to support, when Kristen ran the Laws Committee for Civil Rights under law, I would have her on Tom Jones. I'll be like, Kristen, you need to get a website because you got to have money to operate. We can't do what we do if we're not supporting ACLU. If we're not supporting Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights, if we're not supporting LDF, if we're not supporting our institutions, if we're not supporting what Ellie is doing, if we're not supporting what we're doing, because see, we do what we do because I own it. I don't have a boss. I don't have to ask permission. And so when we are able to drive our message, then we're able to communicate with our people. And I know some people say, yeah, but this is bigger. Yeah, I'm not waiting. I don't care what CNN and MSNBC is doing, because we center black people. They're not part of a conversation. They are the conversation. And so that's the challenge for everybody leaving here. That's what we have to do. We're going to close this out. He just stepped in here. He is one of our warriors, swinging on the floor every single day, fighting these folks like a good alpha man should, raising his cane, giving them hell. Put your hands together for my alpha brother, Congressman Al Green of Texas. Y'all can't see this. All right, go ahead.
3 alphas on the stage. There we go. I love it.
Thank you very much for the very kind and warm introduction. I promise I will be pithy and concise, terse and laconic. I promise I will make my points and then I will make my way. But first, I have to say this. Hank Johnson does an outstanding job in Congress. Yes, he deserves an expression of appreciation. But that's not the expression I expected. Hank Johnson does an outstanding job in the Congress of the United States of America. Give him a hand, please. Let's hear it for Hank and his wife. Where's the commissioner? All right. Friends, much has been said. I will close with these words. It was the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It was 1965, and it became known as Bloody Sunday. It was the day that John Lewis told me that he thought he was going to die on that bridge. And it was the day that, notwithstanding what they saw as they reached the crest of the bridge, men on horses with clubs, notwithstanding what they saw, they marched on. They marched on. He knew what his fate was, but he marched on. We have to march on. Because of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a president from the state of Texas, you know his name, I need not call it, but I will. The president from the state of Texas signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He wrote Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, there were, at the time it was signed, 6 African-American members of Congress, 5 Latinos, and 4 Asians, persons of Asian ancestry. Now we have more than 60 African Americans, and that's because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We have more than 50 Latinos because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We have more than 20 Asians because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was written in ink when he signed it. It was signed in ink, but it was written in blood. And we have a responsibility, a duty, and an obligation to make sure that we do exactly what they did. They marched on. The battle is not over. It is sometimes confused with comfort. Yes, we are comfortable. Yes, we have nice cars. But don't confuse comfort with liberty. Don't confuse it with liberation. Don't confuse it with freedom. You don't have the freedom to speak, because if you did, you could say racism on CNN. You can't say it and go back. You said one time. I admire these folk who are with these organizations greatly. I admire this brother who stood here, who has been a part of this liberation movement. But I want to tell you, I admire you too for just being here. It means something for you to be here and hear the messages that you have heard. But it would be meaningless if you just contain them within yourself. Please take the message to the masses. Let them know that the march is not over. We must march on until victory is won. Thank you, everybody.
So to everybody in here, we've been live streaming this here, and then we are going to, at the conclusion of my show tonight, I'm live 6 to 8. We'll restream this entire panel so you can let folks know. Just go to our YouTube channel, so that way if they're not here, they can hear this entire panel and all the messages that we had here. And again, if we do that, then more people here. So you got almost 300 people sitting in the room. We should have 300,000 able to hear our message by utilizing social media. Congressman Johnson, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Let's give this panel a hand. And let's give our moderator a special shout out, even though he's an alpha. I want to thank all of you all for your time, your expertise. Thank you for being here to share with this group what we face as a people. And in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., we shall overcome. So thank you all for being here. And let's go ahead and take this picture also.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.